and the value in today's course. So this could be a nice, easy reference for you in the future. When you look at when you look at Project Management Institute, PMI, for those of you that attended some of my courses last week, there are 5 phases: the initiation, planning, execution, monitoring, controlling, and closing. And then those kind of align nicely to the 10 knowledge areas. Today, we're going to talk about 4 of those key knowledge areas. Okay, let's begin with stakeholder management. And I always like to begin many of my topics with a cartoon. I don't know about you, but I've been in this situation where you're in a conference room with your stakeholders on the project, and you feel like you're all by yourself on one end of the table, and they want to say to you, we don't want you to view this committee as being in any way confrontational. Again, stakeholders, very, very important. They will let you know if they're happy or not. So, what is stakeholder management team? It includes the people. It may be a group, maybe an organization. But yet they could either positively or negatively impact your project. So you need to know who they are, what their personas are, what top of mind wants and needs. Because as many of you know, you could have 5 stakeholders having 7 different wants and needs. So you're going to have to develop a strategy to effectively communicate and satisfy their expectations. But more importantly, like anything else, Murphy's Law, things, if they can't go wrong, they will go wrong. So you're going to have to learn to manage conflicts, especially given and taken with your stakeholders. So identify who they are, manage them closely, because they could eventually help you in your project success. This is an example, team, of a stakeholder management template. Very simple. It just high level talks about the project, all right, the dates, who's the project manager, etc., etc. And then you could have certain stakeholders with certain criteria about each of them, their title, maybe their contact information, what's important to them, etc., etc. And you could share this not only with your folks on your team, but maybe with third-party people, etc., so that everybody understands the key stakeholders, who they are, and what's important to them. So when you look at stakeholder management process, as I said, you want to identify them. And then you want to develop a strategy, some plan, and I have some examples how that could be formulated to help you. And then communicate with them throughout the project life cycle. And as you can imagine, team, you communicate with them differently, say, than having a team status meeting with all of your project team members. Keep it high level, keep it consultative, and keep it as simple and crisp as possible when you are communicating with them. And then you want to establish a trusting relationship with them. You want to monitor that relationship, that they trust you, you trust them, they believe in you, etc., etc. Anybody in the company that you're serving can be a key stakeholder. Most often, they could be end users. The users, say, if you're doing a global enterprise deployment of a new network, of new software, etc. And managing them could be more often than not problematic. Let me give you an example. in using a construction project. It says here, if it's often difficult to identify who actually is the client, because there could be maybe a single point of contact, but that person may not really be the client, but a representative of the client. This person has the responsibility, say, of juggling different requirements, say, within the client, and as a result, they may be subject to many influences which may affect your project. So understand who truly has a stake as a stakeholder in your project. And these have different wants and needs, which could make stakeholder management somewhat complex. Just be aware of that, the stakeholder template to help identify their wants and needs could be a great tool for you. Internal stakeholders, they could be people maybe not part of the client organization. As I said, they may have an interest in it. It could be users who may be passengers on a transport project, on a rail project, maybe people living near an environmental large project, building a bridge, a dam, whatever. These people may get involved positively or negatively. They may wield influence too. So managing project stakeholders could be a somewhat highly complex task. I see someone here, being a project manager, all my team members, they are also considered stakeholders. Absolutely. I think that's NV. That is so true. You have internal stakeholders and you have external stakeholders. But the key of stakeholders, I think you all would also agree, expectations are requirements. What they seem to expect, they may consider a requirement. So you're going to have to understand what's real, yet what's imaginary. And it comes down to two types of requirements, the product and the process. Projects may succeed on the product side, but sad to say, may fail on the process side. Maybe they weren't informed, okay? They weren't kept up to date. So practical considerations here, team: collect these requirements, define them, manage them, okay? And stakeholder management and communication are truly deliverables and deserve that tender, loving care, attention. Stakeholder management is right up there with communication, which, as you all know, is top for you, the project manager. And you know, the other thing I want to share this with you, project managers can be like professional gamblers. Neither can you guarantee success, but you want to tilt it, per se, in your favor. Okay? So focus on increasing your odds to achieve that project success. But what do stakeholders want to do? They ask for more exact, definitive, if you will, estimates, where there's the greatest uncertainty up front. Okay? They question the costs. When are we going to start? I want it finished tomorrow, etc., etc. So practical considerations, it takes you being strong, being confident as the project manager, but yet being rational and foster the project management principles of the profession. But it's not about guaranteeing, but doing what is best so that it's a win-win proposition in achieving the desired outcome of the project. All right, stakeholder power interest grid. This is an interesting tool. It's a simple tool in terms of an XY type of plot, low to high. On the X, interest, and on the y-axis, power. So let me share some verbiage on each of these that could help you frame up and position your stakeholders on your project. When you look at high power and high interest, okay, that is something where you want to manage the expectations carefully, interact, push any possible communications accordingly. When you look at high power, but yet low interest, you could eliminate, per se, some of the information. It's more of a pool type of communication. Low power, but yet high interest, is typically affected by the project. Maybe there's changes that take place, so they're going to require frequent communication. And then lastly, low power, low interest. Maybe you could here minimize your communications. Just keep them informed so that they feel, part of the team, so to speak. The power, interest, stakeholder grid. Here's another team, that's called the salience model. And this is kind of like a Venn diagram, where in essence, it is parsed out into 8 different entities, ranging from dormant all the way up to not a stakeholder, somebody that's outside of the circles. But these circles kind of look at power, who needs urgency, and lastly, legitimacy. So you want to account for these 3 type of circles across 8 different type of stakeholder groups. So as you're forming that template, the stakeholder management communication template, they each may require a unique strategy. Some may be common, some may be unique. Team, this is another type of stakeholder model that's called the social network model. And it looks at relationships. Who is working, who is avoiding regarding relationship. And it maps and links those relationships across key stakeholders that say are part of your project. And the center depicts the spanning across multiple type of clusters. So for example, in the green circle there, how that spans across multiple, say, groups or end users, for example. So in this example, I use Tim. Tim, as you could see, is a very influential end user because he's at the center of that cluster circled in green. But interestingly enough, you quickly find out that you, say the project manager, maybe your project management office, or maybe your business analyst, or others that are part of your team have little to no contact with Tim. So the conclusion, not addressing potentially his concerns, his wants, his interests, could impact your project. This social network is an example of formulating a strategy for this type of individual. Now, tools for setting and managing these expectations, I list about 10 of them here, ranging from the project charter, the scope statement, the WBS, the work breakdown structure, the schedule, the RACI model, responsibility, accountability, consultative, informative, the communication plan, a tool such as, say, a project at a glance dashboard, obviously your project planning, and your project kickoff. So for the next several slides, I'll show you, team, and I'd like to give to you some templates for each of these. Let's look first of all at the stakeholder management. As I said earlier, there are 10 knowledge areas comprised of the Project Management Institute. These 10 knowledge areas have a total of 49 processes. This is one example of one of those 49 processes. This process is called Identify Stakeholders. The template for each of those 49 processes is very much the same, meaning you identify the process, that process has certain inputs. Within those inputs, there are certain tools and techniques, and there is an output associated with this particular process. So I just want to take a moment up front. The 49 processes, each process has the same template, a name, inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs. So as you're studying for your PMP exam, keep this in mind so that it could really help formulate how each of these are framed out. Stakeholder management. When you look at the planned stakeholder engagement, this is another process within stakeholder, the stakeholder knowledge areas. Again, some of the inputs are the same here. The output, more often than not, is some type of plan. So if you're going to plan stakeholder engagement as the process, more often than not, if you had a question, say, what is the output of the planned stakeholder engagement? The answer is the stakeholder plan. Or it could be an update of some sort. Okay? Here too is the managed stakeholder engagement. As you can see, some of the outputs are plans, maybe lessons learned, organizational process asset updates. The other key thing I just want to take a moment, when you look at the tool and technique column of each of these processes, I should say, a lot of times there's a lot of commonality. Expert judgments, maybe it's meetings, communication skills, things to that nature. So I share this with you as you study, say, for the exam. There's a lot of same look and feel for the various processes, especially if you're asked a question, say, in the certification exam. Okay, here's an example, team, of that project charter I touched upon a few slides ago. All right, high level talks about the start, the end date of the project, who's the project manager, high level business needs, maybe some identified risks that are known up front, maybe some key assumptions that are needed, the financials, etc., etc. The project charter, very important for managing stakeholders. Here is the project charter process. What's the output of develop the project charter? The project charter. Maybe some assumptions, as an example. Here is the project scope statement. The scope statement. Last week we talked about and had an exercise on scope statement. The name of the project, the sponsor, approvals, things to that nature. Some deliverables. Again, plan to scope management is the process. What's the output? The plan. Again, common tools and techniques, data analysis, expert judgment, collecting requirements. Define the scope. Again, another tool in the manage stakeholders. The work breakdown structure. For those that joined us last Tuesday, I went in detail on the work breakdown structure, utilizing building a home as an example of a work breakdown structure type of how you come down, level 1, level 2, etc., etc. Here's the work breakdown structure. The process is to create one. The outcome, the output, I should say, is the work breakdown structure itself, the work packages, the dictionary, things to that nature that we talked about last week. Here's an example of project schedule. Very, very important to stakeholders. Again, you could use this, say, in Microsoft Project. Okay, it talks about the various tasks on the left, the start, the end date, maybe the duration, and then you color code some of those specific tasks, when they start, when they end, how they overlap, or maybe when one starts, contingent on a prerequisite when one ends. Schedule management. You want to plan schedule management. What's the outcome? The output is the plan of the schedule. You want to develop the schedule. This could be maybe where you look at the baseline of the schedule. Okay, maybe updates to the project plan, project management plan, things of that nature. So again, this could be a nice package for you to learn a process, certain inputs, common tools and techniques as I shared, and then some outputs accordingly. All right, for those of you that may not be familiar with the RACI model, again, responsible, accountable, consultative, and informative, this is a nice at a glance I want to share with you. The definition in this particular case: who is responsible, who is accountable, who is a consultant, who is informed. And I use as an example, because soccer is a global sport, how you could utilize the RACI model in a soccer team example. So for example, the head coach and of many sports teams, as you could imagine, is held accountable for winning and for the team's success. The team physician coach is a consultant on the team to make sure the athletes are in top physical condition. The broadcast announcers, say, who announce the soccer, the baseball, the basketball games, they are the informants, those that inform the audience on the play-by-play, the status of the game. And lastly, the players, they are held responsible to play the game and to play the game within their position. So, for example, you never want a goalie on your team to be running down the field to try to score a goal in the other team's net. Playing your position and being held responsible for that position. And what you could do is map it, as I'm showing here, in tasks and activities on the left, maybe the team members or functional groups on the top, and then who is an R, an A, a C, and an I within the body of that matrix, the RACI model. Here's an example, team, of the management plan for communication. Simply put, it shows the stakeholder how we're going to communicate with that stakeholder, how often we're going to communicate, what is their responsibility, and maybe their interests, what they like, maybe personally and professionally, just so you know how to break the ice, to introduce yourself. Oh, I understand you like to play golf, or whatever the case may be, to start forming a trusting, working relationship. And share this not only internally across your team, but also for others that you're serving. So when you look at the planned communication management process, the output is the communication management plan. Again, some common tools and techniques noted here, and some common inputs. Again, all part of the stakeholder management plan. This is an example, team, of a project dashboard. I like to call this at a glance. And this dashboard could be maybe each column could be a unique project that you're managing, or it could be certain key KPIs or metrics that you're monitoring at a glance. Okay? A project dashboard. So if you're communicating with stakeholders, hey, Sam, just give me the facts. Are we on track? Are we red, yellow, green? Are we up? Are we down? Etc., etc. A great tool to consider for stakeholder management communication. Here's an example of a project plan. Again, a particular task. How far are we in completing that task? Have we started that task? Have we completed that task? When did it start? When did it end? Again, a template example of a project plan. When you want to develop the project management plan, the output is the plan. Here's a project kickoff example for those of you that joined me last week. Here's some things to consider before having your project kickoff, during the meeting, things to consider, and then after the meeting, things to follow up accordingly. Project kickoff. This could be an excellent example to make sure everybody is on the same page, including your stakeholders, to have a very effective, informative kickoff meeting. So when you look at stakeholder management, some concluding items I want to share with you, it helps simplifying some of this potential complexity. You want to look at this to achieve maximum benefit in that relationship in working with the various stakeholders. The who, the how, the what. And if you could somehow, some way, could get some consistency, some clarity, it only helps you. And you want to manage, as I said and emphasized earlier, stakeholders throughout the project life cycle. So, this is the first of our simple, fun examples, exercises, stakeholder management. So, how many of you have ever heard people say, you know, I just lost an hour of my life and I'll never get it back? Interesting point. Often it's associated with business, but you need this skill of managing time in every aspect of your personal and professional life. And lack of managing time could what? increased stress, frustration, poor performance. Worst case scenario, burnout. So time management, when you look at process, you want to plan it accordingly. What needs to be done as an activity? In what sequence do they need to be done? What activities require what resources? How long are each of those durations to help develop a schedule? And then what I like to call the eye in the sky, to manage, to make sure we're on track throughout the project life cycle. So effective time management is not to do more work. It's to work more smartly, efficiently, effectively. And if you structure it in such a way, you could minimize stress. Let's face it, we are all human beings. Studies show people who work more do not actually get more work done. Interesting point. And you want to avoid distractions. Many of you know we're in this world of information, email, social media, meeting after meeting after meeting, WebEx, Zoom, you name it. Try to minimize these type of distractions such that what results are those that are important. But this doesn't mean all work and no play, all right? But if you manage your time properly, not only do things get done, but you'll have more time to enjoy things you enjoy doing. So when you look at tasks, priorities, planning is right up there in terms of importance, like communication. All right, you want to create some type of task list. Make sure there's a prioritization of that list. And I think all of you would agree, all tasks are not created equally. But practical considerations here, team, do the complex tasks first, if possible. And consider two techniques I want to share with you shortly. One is the Pareto Principle, okay? And the second is a methodology called the Eisenhower Method, focusing on which are more important. Let me give you an example. The Pareto Principle is kind of like that 80-20 rule, where you want to maximize the result by utilizing minimal effort. And this person, he was an economist, Vilfredo Pareto, says for many outcomes, roughly 80% of the consequences come from 20% of the causes. Meaning if you satisfy those 20% of the causes, 80% can be accomplished. And this is a simple plot of what that means. The point here, don't get lost in the details. Focus on the big hitters, the big picture, to get maximum result from minimal effort. The Eisenhower method is somewhat different, where you are involving delegation. Let's face it, you as a project manager, you're not responsible to do all of the tasks in the project plan. But it categorizes the prioritization of tasks in terms of urgency and importance in an XY plot. So, for example, if something is high delegate, low importance, high urgency, okay, but low importance, things to that nature. So you want to start with completing what's most important. schedule the deadlines, delegate the task, maybe of secondary importance, or the bottom line, team, if a task is neither important nor urgent, get it off your plate. Eliminate them. When you look at estimating and tracking time, again, if you identify, you prioritize, then you could best estimate. Include potential constraints, prerequisites, factors such as that. Some tasks may go as unplanned. Maybe include for time, for cost, things of that nature, a little buffer, a contingency, if you will. Maybe include time for researching other possible activities that you may not be aware of at this time. But keep the team workload in mind, where you don't want one person overloaded and others with little to no